Almost every part of our modern lives rely on computers in some way, and that's given criminals the opportunity to exploit technology in a way that's never before been possible. Both because of the interconnectedness of networks and their complexity, it's a constant battle between developers and hackers to keep things secure, and sometimes things go worryingly wrong. From ones that have caused billions of dollars worth of damage to those that have released confidential data or interfered with the operations of vital services. Today, I'm counting down 15 of the scariest computer viruses ever created. Number 15. Sasser. The Sasser virus first made its appearance in April of 2004, and it's classified as a worm, which means it can propagate itself across networks without requiring user interaction. The creation of this virus was attributed to a German computer science student who aimed to exploit vulnerabilities in the Microsoft OS, and would become such an issue that Microsoft offered a bounty of $250,000 to find out who was responsible. At its core, the Sasser worm exploits a vulnerability in the local security authority subsystem service, which is responsible for enforcing the security policy on Windows OS. This vulnerability was discovered in a version of Windows XP in Windows 2000, and it allowed the worm to create a buffer overflow and would cause the system to crash and then reboot without user consent. The Sasser worm spread by scanning random IP addresses to identify other vulnerable systems, and then once one was found, the worm would install itself, and then a new host would begin scanning for additional targets. This aggressive method of self-propagation led to widespread disruption, as it generated significant network traffic and degraded system performance. The impact of the Sasser virus was huge. It caused millions of computers to crash and reboot repeatedly, leading to considerable downtime and loss of productivity. The full cost isn't entirely known, but with canceled flights and hospital procedures, there was a very real threat to life. Number 14. Zeus. The Zeus virus, also known as Z-Bot, is a powerful piece of malware that mainly targets Microsoft Windows systems. It was first identified in 2007 and became known for its financial and data stealing capability, mainly through the use of keylogging and form grabbing. Zeus is a type of Trojan horse. Its development has been highly effective in capturing sensitive information from individuals and organizations, and it led to substantial financial fraud and security breaches across the world. Zeus operates by infecting a host computer and remaining dormant until it detects that the user has accessed a banking site or entered sensitive information. Once this happens, the malware activates its keylogger function, or uses form-grabbing techniques to collect login details, passwords, and other critical information. This information is then sent back to a command and control server where cyber criminals can access it and use it to make fraudulent transactions, commit identity theft, or further malicious activities. What made Zeus really effective and dangerous, though, was its ability to evade detection by most antivirus software. It managed this through its stealthy design and the frequent updates provided by its developers, which helped it avoid signature-based detection. Zeus has been responsible for large-scale financial theft from consumers and businesses alike, and by 2009 was said to have infected over 3.6 million computers in the US alone, with billions of dollars having been stolen. The FBI revealed that it had originated in Eastern Europe, and more than 100 people were arrested. Number 13. WannaCry. The WannaCry ransomware attack, which struck in May of 2017, was a huge event that affected hundreds of thousands of computers across 150 countries. This global cyber attack utilized the WannaCry virus, which is a type of ransomware that exploited vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows, particularly targeting those systems that were either unpatched or running older versions of Windows. The attack was unprecedented in scale due to the exploit it used, known as Eternal Blue, which was believed to have been developed by the U.S. National Security Agency and later leaked by the hacker group called Shadow Brokers. This exploit took advantage of weaknesses in the Windows Server message block protocol to propagate itself across network machines without user interaction, a capability that significantly improved its spread. Once infected, WannaCry would encrypt data on the affected computer, rendering files and systems inaccessible. Victims were then presented with a ransom demand, typically in the form of Bitcoin, with a deadline for payment to receive a decryption key to regain access to their files. The demand was usually set at $300 to $600, which increased if the ransom wasn't paid within a specific time frame. The widespread impact of WannaCry included significant disruptions to critical infrastructure and services, including hospitals, banks, telecommunications services, and businesses. One of the worst affected organizations was the United Kingdom's National Health Service, where up to 70,000 devices, including computers, MRI scanners, and blood storage refrigerators, were compromised, leading to the cancellation of thousands of appointments and operations. In the end, the spread of WannaCry was eventually halted by the accidental discovery of a kill switch by a cybersecurity researcher. Number 12. Mirai. The Mirai virus was a piece of malware that surfaced in 2016 that showed the risk of using the Internet of Things. It's a type of malware known as a botnet, which is a network of infected devices that can be remotely controlled by an attacker. Now, what sets Mirai apart is its focus on IoT devices such as digital cameras, DVRs, and routers rather than traditional computers, things that at the time were rarely secured in the same way as a computer. Mirai operates by scanning the internet for devices that are protected by factory default or simple usernames and passwords, which are often not changed by the users. Once it finds such vulnerable devices, it infects them by installing itself, after which the device becomes part of the botnet. These infected devices are then used to launch powerful distributed denial-of-service attacks or DDoS attacks, which can overwhelm websites or networks by flooding them with traffic from multiple sources. Perhaps the most infamous instance of Mirai's impact was on the October 2016 attack on Dyn, a major DNS provider. This attack resulted in prolonged outages at major sites including Twitter, Netflix, Reddit, and CNN. This high-profile disruption brought significant attention to the vulnerabilities inherent in IoT devices and the potential scale and impact of DDoS attacks. The creators of Mirai, after realizing the potential destructiveness of their tool, eventually released its source code publicly, supposedly to evade law enforcement detection. This release led to various offshoots of the malware, worsening the security challenges. In response to the attacks like Mirai, there's been a push for better security practices in the development and management of IoT devices, including the implementation of better security measures like regular updates, unique default passwords, and the installation of security software, hopefully preventing anything from this scale ever happening again. Number 11. Cryptolocker. Cryptolocker is a form of ransomware that was first detected in September 2013 and targets computers running Windows operating systems. It spread primarily through email attachments and existing botnets and would arrive in an email disguised as a legitimate file, such as a PDF or a Word document. Once the attachment was opened, Cryptolocker would encrypt files on a local machine and any connected network drives with a highly sophisticated encryption that was virtually impossible to break without the decryption key held by the attackers. Upon successful encryption of the user's files, Cryptolocker would display a ransom note demanding payment in exchange for the key. The ransom usually had to be paid in Bitcoin, making the transactions difficult to trace. Victims were given a strict deadline to pay, often 72 hours, with the threat that the decryption key would be destroyed if the deadline passed, leaving the encrypted files permanently inaccessible. The impact of Cryptolocker was huge, affecting both individual users and businesses across the globe. It's estimated that over 500,000 machines were infected, with a significant percentage of victims feeling that they had no choice but to pay the ransom. The risk of Cryptolocker came to a partial end in May of 2014, when a coordinated effort by law enforcement and cybersecurity firms successfully took down the game-over Zeus botnet, which was instrumental in distributing the ransomware. During this operation, known as Operation Tovar, servers responsible for Cryptolocker were seized, and communication between the malware and its command and control servers was disrupted. Despite this takedown, though, the legacy of Cryptolocker persists in the form of various derivatives and copycats inspired by its success. The virus fundamentally changed the landscape of ransomware, demonstrating its effectiveness and profitability when you're encrypting a victim's data to extort a payment. Number 10. CLES. The CLES virus, which first emerged in late 2001, is seen as one of the most destructive computer viruses of the early 2000s. As a worm, CLES propagated through email systems, exploiting vulnerabilities in, of course, Microsoft Windows and the programs that ran on it, particularly email clients. Its ability to replicate and spread without user interaction made it really dangerous and difficult to contain. CLES had a variety of sophisticated behaviors that helped it be so effective and last as long as it did. It could replicate itself, send copies to email addresses found in a victim's address book, and even forge email headers. This meant that emails it sent appeared to come from different, often familiar addresses, increasing the likelihood of recipients opening malicious attachments and triggering the virus. One of the most troubling aspects of CLES was its ability to disable antivirus software, making it harder for users to detect and remove it. Additionally, it could install a backdoor in an infected system, allowing the attacker to gain remote control over the computer and access sensitive information. This not only put the individual users at risk, but also compromised the security of entire networks. It ultimately affected millions of computers across the world, causing significant data loss and productivity declines in both personal and corporate environments. The economic damage was made worse by the virus's ability to corrupt files and overwrite data, meaning that organizations faced not only operational disruptions, but also the challenge of restoring data that had been lost forever. Number 9. Code Red. The Code Red virus emerged in July of 2001 and quickly became famous for its rapid spread. This virus, which manifested as a worm, specifically targeted computers running Microsoft's IIS web server software, where it exploited a buffer overflow vulnerability in the indexing software. Once a server was infected, the worm would replicate itself and scan the internet for other vulnerable servers to infect, and this allowed Code Red to proliferate widely and quickly. Within just a few hours of its initial outbreak, the virus had infected hundreds of thousands of servers. One of the most high-profile attacks by the Code Red worm happened on August 1, 2001, when it launched a denial-of-service attack on the White House's web servers. By instructing all infected machines to contact these servers simultaneously, the worm aimed to overload the servers and make the website inaccessible. However, swift action by network engineers who redirected the traffic and filtered the incoming requests held off the attack and managed to keep the White House website operational. The economic impact of Code Red was significant, estimated to be over $2 billion. This figure included the cost of disrupted operations, server downtimes, patch deployment, and security upgrades. This worm spread was another one that highlighted the importance of rapid security response, particularly as Microsoft had released a patch for the vulnerability a month before the outbreak, but many systems had not yet been updated in time. Number 8. Welia. The Welia or Nachi virus was found in August of 2003, and it's a network worm that displayed both harmful and beneficial characteristics. Unlike many other malicious programs, Welia was designed to spread through networks with the intention of fixing the same vulnerabilities it exploited for entry. This self-replicating worm targeted Microsoft Windows systems that were vulnerable to specific security flaws that had also been exploited by the notorious Blaster worm, which had just surfaced a month earlier. Welia's method of infection was to scan networks for machines that exhibited these security vulnerabilities, specifically those related to the RPC DCOM service in Windows. And once a vulnerable system was identified, Welia would exploit the flaw to gain access, then attempt to download and install patches from Microsoft's website to close the hole. Furthermore, it attempted to remove the Blaster worm if found. This behavior was intended to help users secure their systems against further attacks. However, despite these seemingly good intentions, the impact of Welia was not entirely positive. The worm's method of scanning and propagating generated significant amounts of network traffic, which overwhelmed resources and resulted in slowdowns. For large corporate networks, this led to severe disruptions in normal operations, and the automatic changes Welia made to system configurations and its method of self-installation without user consent posed serious concerns regarding system stability and user control, even over their own devices and data. The uncertain nature of Welia raised ethical and practical questions within the IT community about the legitimacy and implications of using malware to combat malware. While some might argue that Welia had a corrective purpose, its deployment method was similar to that of malicious software, making it unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Systems could crash and unintended consequences could arise from the unauthorized modifications made by this worm. Number 7. Melissa. The Melissa virus, which began to spread in March of 1999, was named after an exotic dancer from Florida, and it was one of the first viruses to effectively combine the elements of traditional viruses with the traits of a worm. Created by David L. Smith, the virus originated from an infected Word document posted on an online news group. This document, titled list.doc, claimed to contain passwords to 80 adult websites. but instead housed the Melissa virus. Once the document was opened in Microsoft Word, Melissa exploited the macro capabilities of Word to propagate itself. It automatically mailed itself to the first 50 contacts in the user's Microsoft Outlook address book, which not only enabled its rapid spread, but also inadvertently disclosed sensitive information. Melissa's impact was swift and serious. By using the email systems of affected users, the virus managed to overload email servers, disrupt corporate and government email communications, and cause significant productivity loss. The virus spread globally within hours, infecting hundreds of thousands of computers and causing estimated damages totaling from $300 to $600 million. High-profile organizations, including Microsoft and the United States Marine Corps, were forced to completely shut down their email systems to prevent further spread. In response to the outbreak, significant improvements were made in email security protocols, antivirus detection algorithms, and user awareness, and the legal repercussions for Smith were severe. He was arrested in April of 1999, and by December 1999 he pleaded guilty to releasing the virus. Eventually, he was sentenced to 20 months in federal prison, fined $5,000, and banned from accessing computer networks without court authorization. His prosecution was among the first to underscore the legal consequences of distributing malicious software, setting a precedent for how cyber crimes would be handled. Number 6. Stormworm. The stormworm virus, which was first detected in January of 2007, was one of the most dangerous examples of malware from the mid-2000s. Named after the stormy weather news headlines it initially used as a lure in email subject lines, the stormworm is a Trojan horse program that primarily spreads itself via email. Its technical name is PCOM, but it gained the Stormworm moniker after one of its more successful email campaigns, which baited users with subjects like 230 dead as storm batters Europe. While it was able to turn infected machines into bots or zombies that could remotely be controlled. Once infected, these machines became part of a botnet which could be used by the malware's creators, which in this case was mostly sending massive volumes of spam emails, conducting DDoS attacks, and stealing personal information from the infected host. The virus spread itself by sending out emails with enticing headlines that played on current events or personal interests, and these emails contained malicious links or attachments that, when clicked or opened, would execute the stormworm. At its peak, the stormworm botnet was believed to include millions of compromised computers and accounted for a large percentage of the world's spam. Its ability to evade detection and countermeasures by security systems through polymorphic code, which is code that changes every time it's run, made it particularly resistant to antivirus software. Efforts to dismantle the stormworm's network faced considerable challenges due to the decentralized nature and anonymity of its controllers, but over time, targeted cybersecurity campaigns gradually reduced the effectiveness of this botnet. Number 5. I Love You. The I Love You virus, which you may also know as the love bug or love letter, is one of the most virulent computer viruses ever created. It first appeared on May 4, 2000, originating in the Philippines, and it quickly became a global problem due to its rapid spread. This malware combines social engineering with simple script writing to wreak havoc on personal and corporate computer systems everywhere. The I Love You virus was a worm that could spread itself by automatically sending copies to all contacts in the victim's Microsoft Outlook email address book. This method of distribution was incredibly efficient, and it resulted in the virus infecting tens of millions of computers within just a few days. The delivery mechanism of the I Love You virus was deceptively simple yet effective. It arrived in email boxes with the subject line, I love you, and an attachment named loveletterforyou.txt.vbs. The double extension of the file was a trick used by the creators, as the .vbs was executable code, but it was easily overlooked by users who expected a harmless text file due to the .txt in the name. When the attachment was opened, the script executed and the virus was activated. Once activated, it overwrote a variety of file types including Office files, image files, and audio files, making them unusable. It would also attempt to download a file from the internet, which was a password-stealing application that would transmit personal data back to the hacker. The damage caused by this virus was substantial, with estimated financial impacts ranging from $5.5 to $8.7 billion globally. Companies and government agencies worldwide had to shut down their email systems in order to stop the spread of the virus and begin recovery. The creators of the I Love You virus were eventually identified as young Filipino computer programming students. At the time, though, no law in the Philippines specifically addressed computer hacking, so initially they weren't charged with any crime related to the release of the virus. However, the event led to increased cybersecurity legislation worldwide, including in the Philippines, which soon passed its first cybercrime law. Number 4. SQL Slammer. The SQL Slammer, also known as Sapphire, began causing problems in January of 2003 as a highly aggressive and fast-spreading worm that targeted vulnerabilities in Microsoft's SQL Server and MSDE 2000. It exploited a buffer overflow issue in the system which allowed it to execute its payload and replicate itself rapidly, which was at the time a unique characteristic that made it difficult to combat. SQL Slammer was a surprisingly small piece of malware and roughly only 376 bytes in size, and this allowed it to fit within a single network packet. Due to its small size and the method of propagation via UDP, it was extremely efficient at broadcasting itself over networks. Within just a few minutes of release, the SQL Slammer had infected nearly 75,000 vulnerable hosts, according to official estimates, and significantly slowed down general internet traffic. It caused widespread denial of service on some of the internet's core infrastructure, including the disruption of thousands of ATMs, cancellation of airline flights, and interference with elections and emergency services. The design of the SQL Slammer was straightforward yet effective. It didn't try to steal information or corrupt systems, but instead spread itself to create massive network congestion. This congestion came from the enormous amounts of network traffic generated as each newly infected system would then scan for other vulnerable systems at random, using the same exploit. This method of random scanning combined with a high rate of replication meant that the Slammer worm could double its rate of infection approximately every 8.5 seconds at its peak, making it one of the fastest spreading worms of its time. The SQL Slammer highlighted several critical vulnerabilities and shortcomings in network and database management practices, and again showed how important it is to keep systems updated. The aftermath of the SQL Slammer also had long-lasting effects on how organizations handle system security, and it led to improvements in the response protocols for dealing with these rapid-onset cyber threats. Number 3. Conficker. Conficker, which is also known as Downup, Downadup, or Kiddo, is a notorious worm that first appeared in November of 2008, exploiting vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows to infect millions of computers. The scale and resilience of the Conficker worm have made it one of the most significant malware outbreaks in the history of computing. Conficker is mainly known for its ability to infect computers through a flaw in the Windows Server service used by Windows 2000, XP, Vista, Server 2003, and Windows Server 2008. The worm exploits a vulnerability in the way that Windows systems allocate memory for processing remote procedure call requests. Microsoft issued a patch for the vulnerability just a month before Conficker started spreading, but many systems remained unpatched and vulnerable. Once installed, Conficker disables several system services, including Windows Automatic Update, Windows Security Center, Windows Defender, and Windows Error Reporting, to prevent both the detection of the worm and the ability to fix the vulnerabilities it exploits. This makes it challenging for users to remove the worm from their computer and restore the affected services. To make things worse, Conficker is a highly sophisticated piece of software and uses a variety of advanced techniques to avoid detection and enhance its durability, including polymorphic code, dynamic domain generation, and peer-to-peer networking. The worm generates hundreds of domain names daily as potential command and control servers using a changing algorithm. This dynamic domain generation complicates efforts to block it and channels that take down the botnet that Conficker creates. The impact of Conficker was pretty widespread, affecting government, business, and personal computers across more than 190 countries. In January 2009, the worm infected the French military computer network, forcing aircraft to be grounded. And it also infiltrated the UK Ministry of Defense and other significant institutions. In response to the worm, the Conficker Working Group was set up in 2008 as a coalition of researchers, security firms, domain registries, and universities. This group worked together to reduce the spread of Conficker by coordinating defenses and disrupting its CNC communications. Despite these efforts, though, Conficker remains active in some regions even to this day, persisting on machines that are either poorly protected or have not been updated with security patches. Number 2. Stuxnet. Stuxnet is a highly sophisticated computer worm that was discovered in 2010, and one of the reasons it was so problematic was it's believed to have been in development for at least 5 years. It was the first known worm developed to target and sabotage industrial systems, and unlike most malware, which typically aims to steal data or cause systems to crash, Stuxnet was designed to subtly manipulate industrial control systems, particularly those involved in the enrichment of uranium. Now, frighteningly, the primary targets of Stuxnet were centrifuges used in Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. By infecting computers running Windows software, Stuxnet sought out Siemens Step 7 software, which is commonly used in industrial control systems. And once it infected those systems, the worm altered the behavior of Siemens programmable logic controllers, which are integral to maintaining the operation of the machinery. Amazingly, Stuxnet was able to do so without detection and caused the physical destruction of the centrifuges by making them spin out of control while simultaneously showing operators that everything was functioning normally. As it targeted Iranian devices, Stuxnet is widely believed to have been developed by the United States and Israel, though neither has officially acknowledged responsibility. Its discovery forced the world to reconsider the potential for cyber attacks to cause significant physical damage and disrupt critical infrastructure, and it forced governments to reassess security procedures. The worm used multiple zero-day exploits, which are vulnerabilities that are unknown to the software vendor at the time of the attack, and had a complex load of attack code that had components for spreading, hiding, and hijacking. Stuxnet reportedly ruined approximately 1/5 of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. The way it was designed allowed Stuxnet to spread through USB flash drives, exploiting a vulnerability in the way Windows processes shortcuts. This method allowed it to jump across network gaps, infecting systems not directly connected to the internet. Once a suitable system was found, the worm updated itself through peer-to-peer communication, allowing it to receive updates and new instructions without the need to connect to external servers. Number 1. MyDoom. MyDoom, regarded as one of the most damaging worms in history, first appeared in January 2004. Also known as Novarg, this malware rapidly became known for its record-breaking speed across the internet, primarily through email, and even now, over 20 years later, it still holds this record. It highlighted significant vulnerabilities in digital communication systems and marked a turning point in how security experts and corporations dealt with the threat of network worms. It was so effective at spreading through email because it contained deceptive language that would encourage users to open a file attachment that appeared to be harmless. The emails often included text that made the attachment seem like error messages from mail servers or other system notifications, prompting users to click on them without suspicion. Once executed, MyDoom installed itself on the host machine and began the process of replicating and sending itself to email addresses found in the user's address book. This propagation method was not only highly effective, but it also contributed to a significant overload of email systems worldwide. In addition to email propagation, MyDoom had a secondary method of spreading through the Kazaa peer-to-peer file sharing network. It copied itself into Kazaa's shared folders under enticing names to trick users into downloading and executing the worm. The virus also included a payload that launched a DDoS attack against targeted websites, specifically the websites of the SCO Group and Microsoft, causing extensive downtime, especially for SCO, which was involved in a controversial legal battle over Linux code at the time. The motive behind these attacks remains a subject of speculation, but it's widely believed to have been connected to the Linux community's animosity towards SCO due to its legal actions. The economic impact of MyDoom was enormous, with estimates of the damage ranging up to $38 billion. These costs mainly added up because of productivity losses, server downtime, network congestion, and the spending required to combat the infection. Even years after its initial outbreak, variants of MyDoom continued to appear, showing that its code base was still being used to create new threats. And this persistence shows just how sophisticated a design it had and the ongoing challenges that malware present to cybersecurity efforts. It's amazing that it's still the fastest spreading virus of all time, but in many ways that proves programmers, network administrators, and day-to-day users are much more aware of the threats that can be posed. In the early 2000s, it was a relatively new phenomenon, but now, with so much of our lives relying on technology, processes are in place to prevent mass attacks like these, and cyber criminals instead focus on smaller, more focused attacks. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please update your software, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you to our channel members.